Welcome to the ToonRaider Variety Hour. I'm your host, ToonRaider. Today we're going to be breaking down the Ahsoka premiere of Episode 1 and 2, and just giving my thoughts, and kind of a play-by-play, but not really. So before we get into it, I just want to let you guys know where I stand as a Star Wars fan. I love Star Wars, I love the prequels, I grew up on the prequels. At that same time, or around there, maybe shortly after, I was also growing up on the Clone Wars. So Ahsoka is my favorite character. Well, not my favorite character. My favorite character is Anakin. Ahsoka's probably my second favorite character. I always said that her and Maul were tied, but if I'm being honest, Ahsoka's probably my second favorite character, yeah. So this show, I was really excited for it. Whenever she appeared in Mando Season 2, I was stoked, and I really liked Rosario Dawson's performance. And then she appeared in Book of Boba Fett with Luke Skywalker also there. And for me personally, and this is a bit controversial, I was never the biggest Luke Skywalker fan. I don't hate him necessarily. I like him. I don't love him like a lot of other people do, because he just wasn't the Skywalker I grew up on, if that makes sense. And I think he's a bit too perfect and a bit too polished, and I definitely really like him. I just don't love him. So I guess what I'm saying is that whenever we saw him in the episode, I was more excited to see Ahsoka. And then I'm backtracking a little bit, in Mando Season 2, whenever she's squaring off against who we now know as Morgan Elsbeth, and she says, "Where is Grand Admiral Thrawn?" That is genius. I just was like, yo, Grand Admiral Thrawn. Because I forgot to mention this, I actually didn't watch Rebels as it was coming on Disney XD, because number one, we didn't have Disney XD, and number two, I just wasn't that interested in Rebels, because I was kind of down on Star Wars at that time period, because Disney acquired it, and we had the sequels coming out, and I just was like, nah, I'm checking out. So I didn't check out completely though. I mean, I was still a Star Wars fan. I still checked out Rogue One when it came out. I still, I was still a fan. I just didn't watch Rebels, and I watched the sequels and wasn't a big fan. Point is, I was really excited for this show. And then Mando Season 3 came out. Will we see Ahsoka? No, we did not see Ahsoka. And it was a little disappointing for me. I think I enjoyed it more than most people did. A lot of people hated that it shifted focus from Din Djarin to Sabine. I mean, not Sabine, to Bo-Katan. But for me, I liked Bo-Katan more than Din Djarin anyway, so I never really got fazed by that. But I still can't admit that it wasn't the best season that it could have been. And so I had a lot riding on this show, Ahsoka, because all that usual hype I got from Mando Season 3, some of it was there, but some of it wasn't. And I found that it all transferred to Ahsoka. And in the days leading up to the premiere, I was super nervous, because I had loved all the trailers I saw. I was very interested. And then they showed that Anakin trailer with his voice, and it was called The Force, I think. The trailer was called Force. And I was very interested to see how they're going to integrate Anakin into this show. Now, to be fair, I have seen some leaks, not like visual leaks of like frames from the show or anything. I've seen some. I've read some leaks that it's not like so much that it spoils the show, but it's a few interesting details. So I might touch on those in this video, but there's a few ways they could integrate. I don't know, was I saying integrate? It's integrate. There's a few ways they could integrate Anakin into this series, but right now, what's important is that trailer really upped my hype levels, because I loved Ahsoka, and I was hyped for Ahsoka, of course. And Dave Filoni, of course, helming this series. But you got Anakin in the trailer and its new voice lines. That just shot it up on my hype list for me. And then they were like, 9 p.m. Ahsoka. I'm like, yes, that's amazing, because they come out at 3 a.m. They were coming out at 3 a.m. but I couldn't wake up that early because it was a work day, work night, whatever. So I would have to wake up an hour before work at 5 o'clock and watch an episode. And then they say it's at 9 o'clock. I'm like, yes, this is amazing. So it just worked out to where like things conveniently got a little bit better, and then the Ahsoka premiere. So let's break down how I felt about the actual show itself. First, I want to say, when I pressed that play button and the usual credits were all red, like in the opening of the Star Wars logo thing, and then that music started creeping in, it was so eerie and evil and malicious and cool. And then we saw that red text scrolling from the bottom to the top. No, was it scrolling from the bottom to the top? I think it was, yeah. I was just so, like, hyped. Now, I read one review from those early fan screenings that they did for Ahsoka, and they kind of ruined that for me a little bit because they said this was the first Star Wars show to have a opening crawl. And I was expecting something more akin to the movies, but I was still able to be captivated by this because it was a lot different than what I was expecting. And maybe if I wasn't expecting it, I would have liked it even more. Or I could have hated it, I don't know. But I got myself excited for an opening crawl that's more traditional. And then when we got the red text and the music, it was just gorgeous. And then, of course, we go to the New Republic ship, and we go to Baylan and Shin just pretty much demolishing the ship. And there's a few references there, like he says, we are no Jedi, like Ahsoka says. And it's it's Shin and Baylan, obviously paralleling Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon. I saw some references to him fighting in the hallway like Darth Vader. Of course, we've always had, I can't remember. Did we have, it could be like Darth Vader in A New Hope whenever he shows up in the ship in the beginning. But point is, it's probably a reference to Darth Vader in Rogue One. Now, one controversial topic, which I don't think needs to be controversial, is people are saying that Baylan in the hallway scene looks a little slow. The way he's blocking the lightsaber bolts. I saw this one person saying, are they dumb? Why are they firing at his lightsaber? They are not firing at his lightsaber. He's blocking the blaster bolts with his lightsaber. And his lightsaber is so big, he needs to use it with two hands because, as we know in Episode 2, Hu Yang says that there's only been one lightsaber constructed like this in hundreds of years. And it's pretty unique, and it's got two places for him to hold it. So it's a two-handed lightsaber. That's why he's so big and broad, and his lightsaber, he's holding it like a knight would in the medieval ages. And I just thought that was pretty cool. So I really like Baylan. I also really like Shin. I think they're pretty cool new villains to introduce in Star Wars. And of course, they rescue Morgan Elsbeth. A lot of people, well, not a lot of people, but some people were complaining about that whole sequence. And if she had magic, then why didn't she escape herself? I don't know. Maybe she just didn't think she could get out of that situation with the magic that she knows. But Baylan says that he's well paid for it because Shin says, you're true to your word, and Baylan says, and well paid for it. And Baylan's also very, proper in the way he talks. He's very deliberate with every movement he makes. He's just a fascinating character. And of course, rest in peace, Ray Stevenson, who portrays this character. So far, from what I've seen, he did an amazing job, and it looks great. He's great. And then Morgan Elsbeth is like, oh, we gotta stop Ahsoka. And then we do the title card, and then it was pretty cool. And then we open with a cool shot of Ahsoka in what we later find out are Night Sister ruins of a stronghold, Night Sister stronghold ruins. She finds the map that leads to Thrawn. And I saw some people being like, why do they have a map that leads to Thrawn? This is stupid. It's not a map that leads to Thrawn. It's a map that leads to the galaxy that Thrawn is in. and Morgan Elsbeth knows where Thrawn is because she's been communicating with him somehow through some sort of magic. She's a Night Sister, so that makes sense. So Ahsoka got the information out of Morgan Elsbeth to go here and get the map and all that stuff. Anyhow, Ahsoka gets the map. She takes out those HK droids. Big explosion. Ahsoka reunites with Hu Yang. And I'm still not sure if I'm saying that name right now. For me, like I said, I grew up with the Clone Wars. And when I did my Clone Wars rewatch a while back, I continued from where I left off from beforehand. And I honestly could not remember Hu Yang. I had to have somebody point it out to me. And then I was like, oh yeah, Hu Yang. The droid from the Young Padawans episodes, whenever they were making their lightsabers and going to Ilum and all that stuff, with Gungi. So all that was really fun. Anyway, we see Ahsoka say that she has the map, and Hu Yang's like, awesome, and then Ahsoka's all like, you need to fly in closer, back up, blah, 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 and Hu Yang's like, that's the job of a Padawan learner, which I am not. And then we see that look in Ahsoka's eye, and from that moment on, I knew there was something going on here. What the heck? What are they alluding to? Of course, we know now it's the Ahsoka and Sabine relationship, so I'm not going to go in depth and do a play-by-play of every line of dialogue like I have so far. I just wanted to get into that opening section and really break it down on a minute detail there, because I thought this was a really strong opening for the Ahsoka television series, and I'm seeing a lot of people online saying that it's a bit slow and a bit boring. I don't get that impression at all. I think it's it gives the characters time to breathe. It lets them, it explores the characters in depth. The dialogue has a moment to breathe. Or, I mean, in Mandalorian Season 3, controversial opinion, I liked it. I actually liked the focus on Bo-Katan. I always liked Bo-Katan. She was always in my top 10 favorite characters. I liked her more than Din Djarin, so whenever it focused on her, I liked that. I understand why a lot of people didn't, though. Point is, that season did rush through some things, and it really didn't. And I think that was a lot of what The Mandalorian always was people said filler episodes, this or that. I think even in Season 1 it had filler episodes. With Ahsoka, though, they're taking it in a whole other direction, and I really loved that. Every moment matters. It's just great. Anyway, we see Ahsoka make her way to, I think, Home 1, I believe it's called. And there's Hera there. I think Mary Elizabeth Winstead does a good job at Hera. At first, I was kind of still getting used to her with the green eyes and everything. But it really just kind of disappears as I'm watching her, and I think she's doing a pretty good job. Her delivery as Hera does not sound like Hera, but I had that same experience with Rosario Dawson as Ahsoka. I remember when I was first watching her in Mando Season 2, I thought she looked great, but I couldn't get over her the way she sounded, and then, of course, as time goes, you get used to it, so if there are people complaining about how she sounds, that's probably a lot to do with the fact that Vanessa Marshall is not playing her in live action, and so the voice isn't really going to be, her voice, but I still like it. We got a moment where Ahsoka said that she's got the map that will lead to Thrawn, and then Hera says that means Ezra could be alive, and they're like, yeah. And then I saw some people online saying, well, it's kind of sad that Ahsoka is more concerned about Thrawn than Ezra. Like, guys, yes, Ahsoka, it's like two birds with one stone type of deal, We're going to find Ezra, and we're going to take down Thrawn and prevent another war. I don't see what the big problem is with that. Anyway, Hera suggests Sabine's help, and Ahsoka's like, I'm not sure if she'll want to help. And then Hera's like, she will for Ezra, which makes sense. We cut to Sabine. A lot of people really hated this scene with her on her speeder missing out on the ceremony. But like Ryder Azadi, played by Clancy Brown, says, Sabine, where's Sabine on this day that we're honoring the Battle of Thal, where Ezra gave his life? Like, of course she's not there. It's kind of sad. I saw some people say it was trauma or something like that, like survivor's guilt. She just doesn't feel like she deserves to be there. And, well, I mean, I don't know if it's that she feels like she doesn't deserve to be there, but she feels like she shouldn't be there because that's honoring the day Ezra died, and it's a weird thing to celebrate for her. It just doesn't feel right because Ezra's not there to celebrate the Battle of Atoll. Does that make sense? Anyway, I did not hate that scene as much as other people did. I saw a lot of people really going in on it online, and I gotta say, that was not something that I got mixed up in with at all. I will say that even though she comes off a little standoffish with Ahsoka, I think that makes sense because it's alluding to the rocky relationship they have. And I really like the Natasha Liu Bordizzo, I think that's how her name is said. I really like her performance as Sabine. She does a good Sabine, and she looks like Sabine. I mean, other than the long hair, but of course, as we know, that gets cut in episode 2 when they do the remake of the Rebels epilogue. Anyway, we go from there, and we see Ahsoka and Sabine getting together, and Sabine references Ahsoka as her master. At first, I was really hesitant and resistant to this idea. I was even more so resistant to the idea that she could be Force sensitive, talking about Sabine. But thinking more about it, in Rebels, Kanan never said that she wasn't Force sensitive. I think Harry even mentions that, because she's not Force sensitive, and Kanan's like, no, the Force resides in all living things. And then I get the idea that it's more that Sabine's personality, she's just too stubborn to really understand the Force intimately like a Jedi would, because she's so Mandalorian. So I think Ahsoka's training, that might be what could unlock her Force abilities. If she can actually get over herself a little bit, she could learn what it means to be a Jedi truly and tap into some of those abilities. Anyway, Sabine takes the map, right? And she deciphers it herself. And a lot of people were saying that it was pretty simple. But, it was simple because you saw how it ended up working. But if you just got a ball and you just looked at it, would you really know how it works or how to solve the puzzle or anything? So I gotta resist that criticism a little bit. I just gotta take a step back from it and be like, okay, have you solved the Rubik's Cube before? I mean, I'm sure plenty of people have. We all know how Rubik's Cube works, and still some people can't solve them because they're so time-consuming. But I guess that's not really the point. The point is that she solves the puzzle, and I forgot how it works as far as the way the scenes are laid out, but I'm pretty sure in this episode we had the Baylan and Shin going to the planet that Ahsoka was on, that Night Sister stronghold was at. And we got the reveal that Morgan Elsbeth is, in fact, a Night Sister. I thought that was really interesting. I remember whenever Mando Season 2 first came out, people were speculating that she was a Night Sister. And I was also resistant to that. And I was like, how could she be a Night Sister? She doesn't even look like a Night Sister. But they did something subtle in a way, and I really appreciate this. Is like George Lucas level retconning. In the Mandalorian Season 2 episode, Morgan Elsbeth had the actor, they didn't do anything to her skin. They didn't put any paint on it or anything. They didn't do any work on like the video quality or anything, so she just had a regular skin tone, and her hair was black. But in this episode, what I noticed was, as soon as the idea of Night Sister was put in my head with her, I noticed that as soon as she turned her head and she spoke again, I saw that her skin was looking a little paler than it was in The Mandalorian, and then it finally hit me that her hair was white. More similar in a white tone to Marin's from Jedi Survivor and Jedi Fallen Order. So I thought that was some nice light retconning to kind of make things make sense as far as that goes. And then, of course, I think at this point it's whenever Baylan sends Shin to Lothal. And so we actually get a little peek into their dynamic. And first, I just want to say I love how Shin is so obedient, I guess the word would be. She's subservient. I like how she's so respectful of Balin. Like that, it doesn't feel like, obviously we know that they're not Sith and they're not Jedi. There's something in between. Dave Filoni has talked about this in interviews before. But I love how they're so warm toward each other. I mean, there's still like a certain distances. There's like a certain distance between them that a Jedi and a Padawan would not normally have, but there's more warmth between them than a Sith and their apprentice would have. So that's interesting. I'm really curious to learn more about them. They're obviously new characters that I'm most interested in, probably. And my girlfriend is also very interested in them. And so that's really fun to see. I'm really curious where they go. Anyway, Ahsoka has a meeting with Hera. And Ahsoka talks about how she left the Jedi Order after Hera's like, yeah, Sabine's stubborn. I'm sure your master found you stubborn. And he did. But, yeah, Ahsoka's like, Anakin never got to finish my training. I walked away from him at the end of the Clone Wars and the Jedi Order, just like I walked away from Sabine. So we know that Ahsoka was the one that got fed up with Sabine. And we see why, I guess. But on another note, Ahsoka's also in a very fragile state of mind. And I think she has a lot of figuring out herself to do. And I think that's what the show wants us to think about. So I think I see some people online saying that they don't like Ahsoka in that she doesn't act like how she does in Clone Wars. Well, no duh. I mean, she's been through a lot. She's not Snips anymore. She's done a lot. She's on a character arc. And also, I just need to mention this. Did I already mention this in the video? Oh well, I'll mention it one more time. We got a couple scenes where she kind of smirks, and we see echoes of her childhood Ahsoka that we know of. So that's nice to see. Anyways, Shin heads to Lothal, beats the crap out of Sabine, and takes the map. We get that iconic stabbing, and a lot of people were hating on it. At first, I was like, stabbed, what? But one thing I kept seeing, though, and I watch reactions sometimes and gauge how people are feeling about the episode. Almost every reactor had their mouth open wide. And everybody on the social medias was, like, freaking out about it. So one thing you got to give them is it gets people talking about the show. It's a very, what? Oh, my God, they just did that moment. For a second, you're like, you don't think about if they're going to live, if they're going to be in the next episode. Just that initial stab, you're not expecting it because it's just a stab. And then you're like, oh my God. So that was really awesome to see. Anyway, the defense I always gave for characters like Reva surviving a stab wound is that they're Darksiders. And whenever Sabine survived this, I saw the new explanation, which I'm more inclined to agree with now, which is Qui-Gon's gut shot was fatal, going through the spine and everything. It was just a fatal stab. Sabine's was off to the side, and then she got immediate medical attention. We also saw Cal Kestis take a stab to the torso, but probably not in a vital organ area or whatever. And I mean, we know Cal, he's laced with Bacta spray, so he was good. So that's just one comment I want to add. So I wasn't really torn up about the Sabine thing. Overall, I really loved the first episode. I loved both of these episodes. I'm going to get into the second episode in a moment, but I just want to say episode 1, I don't know if I'm still riding off the high of really enjoying this show and all these characters and everything. And I don't want to come out the gate with a 9 because I'm sure there'll be more episodes in the series that I really love. So I'm going to give episode 1 an 8. I really enjoyed it. There are a few complaints that I have, but it doesn't really ruin it to the point that I would give it anything lower than an 8. Anyway, I really enjoyed episode 1. What did you guys think about it? Let me know in the comment section down below. And now we will get into Episode 2. And we start the episode up with Sabine waking up in the hospital. And I saw some people saying, like, Ahsoka, why are you being so emotionally cold towards Sabine? Aren't you going to ask about how she's doing and everything? Like, I saw some people, I won't name any names, but I saw some people saying that Ahsoka was just a little bit too cold towards Sabine. But I didn't really get that impression, you know? Ahsoka was angry at her, rightfully so. But she still told her to relax and lay down, and then she just asked questions that were pertinent to the mission. I don't think there was anything that was out of character for Ahsoka that was said during this little exchange. Then we get what is probably the most lore-rich and most interesting part of the episode was Baylan and Shin going to the planet Cetos and putting the orb, the star map, into the, whatchamacallit, the, what's it called? The thing, the plinth or whatever. And then Morgan Elsbeth shows up and she's like, would you like to check out this map? And then boom, she says, this is our galaxy and there's so many other galaxies around. And Baylan's are like, this was a myth, the pathway to Paradia. It was a fairy tale that the kids told at the Jedi Temple. And then Morgan Elsbeth is like, nah, it's not a myth. Oh yeah, and that temple that they're at is created by a people from a distant galaxy, so that's interesting. Now, one thing I'm very excited about is going to this other galaxy, because I know that it's been touched on in Legends, but as far as the movies and TV shows and Disney canon are concerned, we haven't really explored other galaxies yet. And I don't really see a lot of other people talking about this like they should be. Like, this is a whole other galaxy. This isn't the what do they call the uncharted territories or whatever? That's not the something frontier. I can't remember. They referenced it in the sequel trilogy. It's a concept. Anyway, point is, this is a whole other galaxy, and Morgan Elsbeth is constructing a giant machine called the Eye of Sion to transport them to this other galaxy. At Corellia is where she's building it, and it's all really interesting stuff that makes sense, and I'm really digging this plot line of just going to this other galaxy, looking for Ezra, finding Thrawn, the Empire coming back, and the way we're getting there with just taking our time and investigating things, that I think that's really fun. And then Morgan Elsbeth heads off, and then Baylan is like, Shin, you go to Corellia with Marok to complete the task of getting that part from Corellia. And then Shin's like, Master, what are we doing this for? And then, well, that's not what she says exactly, but you get the idea. And then Baylan's like, no, wait, she says, what comes after this? And then Baylan's like, for some, war, for others, new opportunities. And then Shin's like, for us, and Baylan's like, power, the like of which you've never dreamed, or something like that. And they're not Sith, they're not Jedi, something in between. I'm really curious to see where that goes. Anyway, we see Hera and Ahsoka head off to Corellia and figure things out with the manufacturing company, I guess, there, that are pretty much plainly infiltrated by the Empire, remnants of the Empire. At first it's represented like, well, you see, there's going to be Imperials from the previous regime, because you don't turn an empire into a republic overnight, you know? And that kind of reminds me of the Civil War, which wasn't easily like the same thing, but where, you know, the South and the North fought. And then the North won, but you still see plenty of Confederates. It's not as simple as, all right, now they're all gone, we won. It's a little bit more complicated than that. You may have won the battle, but, I mean, there's still people with their own beliefs that are going to persist. And in this situation, these people are working for Morgan Elsbeth, and he says that his loyalty lies with the the donors, the biggest donors, or whoever pays the bills, and I think that's pretty much Morgan Elsbeth. Except, you know what, whenever they do show up and Hera's like, oh, that's something I want to say real quick is the way Hera is sassing off to the guy is great. It's so Hera, and it was that line, that exchange that sold me on this Hera. Before, I was like, yeah, it's a live-action version of Hera. It takes some getting used to. But when she delivered those lines, it was like, yeah, okay, that's Hera. They got her down pretty good. And then, I forgot to mention that we saw Chopper earlier, just a little tease. And then at this point, the Imperial guy exposes himself. Oh, I forgot to mention Hera and Ahsoka have a little discussion, and Hera's like, take Sabine on as your apprentice. And Ahsoka's like, yeah, well, she's just not ready. She's too stubborn, blah, blah, blah. And Hera's like, and what makes somebody ready? And Ahsoka's like, you just know, and so did they. And I wanted to mention this because I think some people don't notice this, or they probably haven't. That's a reference that Dave put in there about Kathleen Kennedy, because he's talked before about how casting Ahsoka was really difficult, and he asked Kathleen Kennedy, how do you know when you got the right person? And he said that Kathleen Kennedy said, Dave, you just know. And Dave really took that to heart, according to him, and he's obviously put it in here as part of Star Wars lore, so I found that interesting. Anyway, Ahsoka jumps out the window to chase after the ship that's taking off, only to be met by Marok, an Inquisitor who a lot of people think is Galen Merrick. While Hera and Chopper go to put a tracking beacon on the other ship. I'll just comment real quick. They get the tracking beacon on the other ship. Chop's personality shines through. They did a great job with Chop. I think he might be voiced by Dave Filoni. I'm not sure. I've also seen people saying that it's obvious that they made it easier for him to be understood in this, because I had an easier time understanding him here than in Rebels, so they probably did do that on purpose. And what I noticed was that whenever Ahsoka is fighting that Inquisitor, he lets the droid go in first, and he kind of probably measures her, sizes her up, and then he and the droid jump in together, and then the droid gets taken out by Ahsoka, and then it's just him. He switches to the two-bladed lightsaber, and they go at it for a little bit. But of course, once he's ready to take off, he just throws his lightsaber at her, and she runs after him, and he gets away. And there's that cool moment whenever he summons his lightsaber toward him, and then Ahsoka easily dodges. So, talking about Marok, he is the only Inquisitor alive as of this moment in the timeline that we know of. We had always suspected, and it was kind of soft confirmed, if not hard confirmed somewhere, that the Inquisitorius were pretty much dead after the Empire. Around the time of the original trilogy is whenever they would be gone. And a lot of people, myself included, kind of assumed maybe Darth Vader killed them after he thought he had no more use of them. But that's probably obviously not the case, because Marok's alive. So a lot of people were saying, oh, this Inquisitor, Ahsoka's going to make short work of him because of how she handled that Inquisitor in Tales of the Jedi. Well, obviously, if he's the last surviving Inquisitor at this point, he's got to have a reason for being the last surviving Inquisitor. He's got to be skilled or very much accustomed to surviving. Both of these things probably come hand in hand. And of course, he knows how to get away from a fight, so that's cool. As far as who he could be, people are saying Ezra Bridger. It's obviously not Ezra Bridger, because they're looking for Ezra Bridger, and they're also looking for Thrawn, and Thrawn is in another galaxy, so more than likely Ezra's in another galaxy. So why would Marok be Ezra? That just is illogical. It doesn't make sense. As far as Galen Merrick, it could be. I saw in the credits that Sam Witwer was credited for additional voices, and if you listen to Marok, he grunts in the episode. I'm not sure if that would be a right credit to give him if he was credited for additional voices. Maybe he voiced like an Imperial talking in the background, or some Republic officer talking in the background somewhere, or maybe a droid that's in the medical bay or something. I don't know. So it could be any number of things, but if he did voice Marok, and it does turn out to be Sam Witwer under the Marok helmet, I can see one of two things. I can either see it being Galen Merrick, but not necessarily Starkiller, more of an adaptation of Galen Merrick that's very much toned down, and it's probably an Inquisitor instead of what he was before, which was a very powerful Force wielder that, Darth Vader took from a young age. Or it could just be a character actually named Marok, who is played by Sam Witwer, who is a homage to Starkiller, but not exactly an adaptation of the character, which I think they've done that before. Anyway, all's well that ends well. They got the tracker on the other ship, and we actually see that after this, before I get to that, Hera's like, why would they still follow the Empire? And Ahsoka's like, well, they follow the money. It's just greed. And that makes sense. That makes sense as to why the Empire would still persist even after the Republic defeats it. Because you still got a lot of selfish people in the galaxy, and the Republic isn't exactly going to give them a easy time, Anyway, we see Sabine finally coming to terms with what she needs to be doing, and she cuts her hair in the exact same way that Kanan does, in an homage to Kanan, which I really enjoyed. I really like Kanan a lot from Rebels. And then, of course, calling back from earlier in the episode, Sabine says, I'm ready. So she just knows that she's ready, and Ahsoka realizes that she knows she's ready, because, of course, she said earlier, Hera said, what makes somebody ready? Ahsoka says, you just know, and so do they. So now they both know. They're ready. So they set out on their adventure, and before that, Sabine recreates the Rebels ending. A few little differences, like Sabine doesn't put the helmet on, and Ahsoka's not in the same robe, and she doesn't have the staff, but I saw a lot of people upset about that, or at least pointing it out. I wasn't really upset about that. It made sense to me that maybe originally Dave Filoni envisioned this being the end of Ahsoka's arc, and so she was Ahsoka the White. But now she's got more growth to do at this point with Dave Filoni writing the story. He's like, well, before I thought this would be a good opportunity to make her Ahsoka the White, completing her journey. But now she's still Ahsoka the Grey because she's still got some journey left in her. And then the ending is, a lot of people were expecting it to end there, and then it ends with the villains talking in their Legion of Doom headquarters. And Marok is just there, standing around. And we get some interesting Baylan dialogue, because he's like, she's coming, I can sense it, or whatever. And then he's like, to kill a Jedi would be a shame. And what's her name? Morgan Elsbeth says, sentimental. And Baylan says, no, truth. And then, Morgan Elsbeth just glances back into space at all this stuff that she's made. Very proud of her. And I just want to give her props. I really like Morgan Elsbeth. She's getting a little bit overshadowed at right this moment with Baylan and Marok and Shin. But I'm sure she'll get really cool character moments as the series goes on. Anyway, guys, that was my main thoughts about the Ahsoka premiere. I really enjoyed them. It was a really strong 2-episode opener. And hopefully this is a really strong episode on the podcast. It's weird calling this a podcast. It's ToonRaider's Variety Hour. And I might talk some more Star Wars. Anyway, I was really excited to talk about Ahsoka with y'all today. I got some ideas of what could happen next episode, and I'm going to drop those now. So, before I get into these predictions, I'm going to be perfectly upfront and say that I'm aware of the leaks. I've read some leaks, and I'm going to do my best not to spoil the future of the show. And my predictions, I wish I could make them completely unaltered from leaks, but I might drive some of these off of a leak or two, but without context, you don't know what I'm talking about, so just bear with me on that. Anyway, for episode 3, I get the odd impression that it might be a filler episode, which is weird for me to say. I don't like that word, and I don't think there are many filler episodes, but in the traditional sense, we're probably not going to go to the new other galaxy in this next episode. In fact, I expect this next episode will probably be doing some training with Sabine and Ahsoka. They'll head off to that planet with Shin and Baylan. They'll fight like we see them fight in the trailer. And then Shin and Baylan take off with Morgan Elsbeth and Marok. Or maybe Marok dies next episode. Who knows? And then maybe Sabine and Ahsoka are like, crap, what do? We probably get some dialogue with Hera. We may even see Jason. I really want to see Jason Syndulla. And it'll probably end there. I don't think it'll be like too crazy. I'm expecting episode 4 to be the episode where we actually get that scene where in one of the trailers, we saw them flying around the Purrgil and everything. So maybe they hitch a ride with the Purrgil and go off to the new galaxy. But anyway, I'm super excited for the future of the series. I'm almost hesitant to predict what happens next because I'm really loving just going along for the ride. So thanks for watching. Well, listening. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace off.